For hundreds of thousands of years, we were not alone. Imagine a world not with one kind of human, but with several, all coexisting on the same planet, a world of deep time, ruled by the rhythms of ice and thaw. And in this world, in the vast, cold lands of Ice Age Europe and Asia, lived our closest extinct relatives. They were not the hunched, brutish monsters of old cartoons. They were the Neanderthals. For over 300,000 years, they were the undisputed masters of their domain. They were powerful hunters, capable of taking down woolly mammoths and rhinos with stone-tipped spears in close-quarters combat. They were skilled toolmakers, crafting sophisticated flint hand axes and scrapers. They controlled fire, they cared for their sick and elderly, they buried their dead with intention, and they survived in a climate that would kill us in a matter of days. They were a stunning evolutionary success story. And then, around 40,000 years ago, after an astonishingly long reign, they vanished. Their campfires went cold. Their voices fell silent. They disappeared from the fossil record, leaving behind only their bones and their tools, as silent witnesses to their existence. What happened? What could possibly cause an entire species of intelligent, adaptable humans who had survived countless ice ages to simply cease to be? This is perhaps the greatest unsolved mystery in all of human prehistory. It is a cold case, 40 millennia old, and the victim is a lost branch of our own family tree. To solve it, we have to look at the evidence, examine the suspects, and piece together the final, tragic moments of the Neanderthal world. Our investigation begins with the arrival of a new character on the scene, us, Homo sapiens. Around 60,000 years ago, our direct ancestors began a major migration out of Africa, spreading across the globe. Eventually, they arrived in Europe, the Neanderthals' ancestral homeland. For a period of perhaps 10,000 years, two distinct human species shared the same valleys, hunted the same animals, and sheltered from the same brutal winters. And it is during this period of overlap that the Neanderthals begin their slow, inexorable fade into extinction. This timing is too precise to be a coincidence. It places one suspect squarely at the center of our investigation, us. This brings us to our first and most dramatic theory. Theory number 1, war and genocide. Was the disappearance of the Neanderthals the result of the first great ethnic cleansing, a prehistoric holocaust where our ancestors systematically hunted down and exterminated their evolutionary cousins? It's a dark and chilling thought. The motive would have been simple and timeless: competition. Both species needed the same resources to survive: the best caves for shelter, the best hunting grounds, the best sources of flint for tools. In a world of scarcity, a world on the edge of a knife, there may not have been room for both of us. The newcomers, Homo sapiens, might have seen the established Neanderthals not as cousins, but as rivals to be eliminated. What would this conflict have looked like? Forget organized armies and pitched battles. This would have been a long, drawn-out war of attrition, fought by small bands of hunter-gatherers in 1,000 forgotten skirmishes. A stolen kill here, a raid on a campsite there, a slow, brutal process of pushing the Neanderthals out of the best territories and into marginal lands where survival was even harder. Did we have an advantage? Perhaps. Some scientists argue that Homo sapiens had more advanced projectile weapons, like the atlat or spear thrower, which allowed us to hunt more safely and effectively from a distance. Neanderthals, by contrast, seem to have relied on heavy, thrusting spears, requiring them to get dangerously close to their massive prey. This technological edge could have translated directly to a military advantage. But what does the fossil evidence say? Can we find the smoking gun on the bones themselves? The evidence here is ambiguous and fiercely debated. We do have Neanderthal fossils with traumatic injuries. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, one individual, Shanidar 3, was found with a rib injury that scientists believe was caused by a light thrown spear, a type of weapon more associated with Homo sapiens. But this is a single case, not proof of systematic warfare. Other fossils show injuries, but they could have been from hunting accidents or conflicts between Neanderthal groups themselves. There is no widespread definitive evidence of a prehistoric genocide, no mass graves of slaughtered Neanderthals. So while the idea of a violent conquest is a powerful and dramatic narrative, and almost certainly some level of conflict did occur, we can't convict our ancestors of murder on this evidence alone. The case is far from closed. The disappearance might not have been the result of a bloody war, but something quieter and perhaps even more effective.
So, if it wasn't a brutal, violent war that wiped out the Neanderthals, what else could it be? This brings us to our second suspect, a more subtle and insidious killer: direct competition. Theory number 2 isn't about active warfare. It's about being quietly, relentlessly, and systematically outcompeted. Imagine two businesses opening up on the same street, selling a similar product. One is an old, established company that has been doing things the same way for a long time. The other is a new, agile startup with a slightly better product, a more efficient production process, and a better marketing strategy. Over time, the new company doesn't need to burn down the old one, it just slowly takes all its customers until the old company withers and dies. This might be a more accurate analogy for what happened between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. We didn't necessarily have to kill them, we just had to be slightly better at staying alive. This slight edge could have come from several different areas. Let's start with technology and diet. While Neanderthals were excellent toolmakers, the toolkit of the early modern humans who arrived in Europe, known as the Aurignacian culture, shows a new level of diversity and sophistication. We find fine bone needles, suggesting the ability to make tailored clothing with multiple layers. In the brutal cold of an ice age, better clothes mean you expend less energy just staying warm. That's a huge advantage. That's energy you can use for hunting, for raising children, for thinking. Homo sapiens also appear to have had a more varied diet. While Neanderthals seem to have been hypercarnivores, specializing in hunting large land animals, our ancestors were more opportunistic generalists. Archaeological sites show that we were eating not just bison and mammoths, but also smaller game like rabbits and foxes, birds, and significantly, fish and shellfish. A broader diet is like a diversified financial portfolio. When one food source becomes scarce, you have others to fall back on. The Neanderthals, with all their eggs in the big game basket, would have been far more vulnerable to fluctuations in animal populations. Another crucial advantage may have been social. Evidence suggests that Homo sapiens lived in larger groups and maintained more extensive social networks than the Neanderthals, who seem to have lived in smaller, more isolated family clans. Larger networks are a massive advantage. They act as a safety net during hard times. If your group is starving, you can call on allies a few valleys over. These networks also act as a superhighway for information and innovation. A new tool-making technique or a better hunting strategy could rapidly spread across a wide area, accelerating technological progress. Neanderthals, in their smaller, more isolated groups, would have been more susceptible to local extinctions and slower to adopt new ideas. But perhaps the most decisive advantage was demographic. It might have come down to simple math. Some researchers have proposed that modern humans had a slightly higher fertility rate or a lower infant mortality rate. Even a tiny 2% advantage in reproductive success, compounded over thousands of years, would have been devastating for the Neanderthal population. We could simply replace them demographically, our numbers slowly but surely growing while theirs stagnated or declined. It wasn't a war, it was a slow, silent tide of replacement. But what if the culprit wasn't us at all? What if we were simply pawns in a much larger, more powerful game? This brings us to suspect number 3, climate change. We tend to think of the Ice Age as a period of stable, deep cold. The reality was anything but. The late Pleistocene was a time of wild, violent climate swings. The climate could flip from relatively mild to full glacier cold and back again in the span of just a few decades. These were not gentle, gradual changes, they were abrupt, chaotic shocks to the entire ecosystem. Neanderthals were superbly adapted to a specific Ice Age environment, the cold woodlands and forested steppes of Eurasia. They were masters of this world. But what happens when that world is ripped out from under you? During these rapid cold snaps, the forests they depended on would have shrunk dramatically, replaced by vast, open, and barren plains. The large game they specialized in hunting, the woolly rhino, the giant deer, would have struggled to survive, their populations crashing. The Neanderthals' entire way of life, honed over hundreds of thousands of years, would have been thrown into chaos. Their world was literally disappearing. Our ancestors, Homo sapiens, having evolved in the far more variable climates of Africa, may have been better equipped to handle this instability. As adaptable generalists with a broader diet and more versatile tools, we might have been better at rolling with the punches, to switch from hunting bison to catching fish, to trapping rabbits when the ecosystem changed. In this scenario, we are not the murderers. The climate is the murder weapon. We just happen to be the ones who are better at dodging the bullet. The Neanderthals were already on the ropes, their populations dwindling and fragmented by a hostile climate. We simply arrived and delivered the final, decisive blow, not through violence, but simply by being there, competing for the last remaining scraps in a dying world.
So, we have our list of suspects. Suspect number 1, Homo sapiens, the violent conqueror. Suspect number 2, Homo sapiens, the superior competitor. And suspect number 3, a volatile, unforgiving climate. Each of these theories paints a plausible, if grim, picture of the Neanderthals' final days. But in the early 2000s, a revolution in science unlocked a clue that was more shocking and more personal than anyone could have imagined. A clue that had been hiding inside of us all along. This clue introduces our fourth and final theory, one that completely reframes the entire mystery. What if the Neanderthals didn't really disappear at all? What if the answer to this great mystery isn't about death, but about love? Theory number 4 is assimilation through interbreeding. For decades, the question of whether humans and Neanderthals could have interbred was a hot topic of debate. Then, in 2010, the Neanderthal genome was sequenced. Scientists were able to extract and reconstruct ancient DNA from their fossilized bones. And when they compared this ancient genetic code to ours, they found something astonishing. Every person today of non-African descent carries between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genome. Let that sink in. Their genes are in our genes. Their legacy is written in our cells. This is not a theory. It is a scientific fact. Our ancestors and Neanderthals met, and at least on some occasions, they had children together. This discovery is a bombshell that changes everything. It proves that the interaction between our two species was far more complex than simple war or replacement. It was intimate. So how does this solve the mystery of their disappearance? The answer may lie in a concept called genetic swamping. Imagine a small village of red-haired people and a massive wave of migration of brown-haired people into the area. Even if everyone intermarries freely, simple mathematics dictates that over a few generations, the red-hair gene, being much rarer in the total population, will become increasingly diluted, while the brown-hair gene becomes dominant. The red-haired people haven't been killed, they have been absorbed into the larger population. This may be what happened to the Neanderthals. The invading population of Homo sapiens was likely much, much larger than the existing Neanderthal population, perhaps by a factor of 10 to 1. Even with successful interbreeding, the smaller, more fragmented Neanderthal gene pool would have been gradually swamped by the much larger human one. Over thousands of years, the distinctive physical traits of the Neanderthals, the heavy brow ridge, the stocky build, the large nose, would have simply faded away, absorbed into the anatomy of the more numerous modern humans.
They didn't die out in a blaze of glory or a desperate last stand. They simply merged with us. Their river flowed into our much larger one and became indistinguishable from it. In this scenario, their extinction was not an end, but a transformation. So, what is the final verdict in this 40,000-year-old cold case? As with most great mysteries, there is no single simple answer. The truth is likely a combination of all four theories, a perfect storm of disastrous events. The most plausible scenario looks something like this. The Neanderthal populations were already under severe stress. A wildly fluctuating climate was battering their ecosystems, shrinking their hunting grounds, and causing their numbers to dwindle and become fragmented. Theory 3. Into this world of crisis walked a new species of human, us, who were perhaps slightly better adapted to the changing conditions, with a more diverse diet and better long-distance social networks. Theory 2. This new competition for the now scarce resources would have been intense. In some places, this competition likely boiled over into violent conflict. Theory number 1. But in the end, as our populations grew and theirs shrank, the final chapter was not written in blood, but in DNA. Through interbreeding, the last of the Neanderthals were gently, gradually, and irrevocably absorbed into the much larger human family. Theory number 4. Their species disappeared, but their legacy endured, hidden within our own genetic code. It is a story of profound tragedy, the loss of another way of being human, a whole world of thought and experience gone forever. But it is also a story of profound connection, a reminder that the line between us and them is blurrier than we ever thought. The greatest mystery of human prehistory is not just a story about them, it's our family story. Now, it's your turn to be the detective. After hearing all the evidence, which theory, or combination of theories, do you find the most compelling? Was it war, competition, twimate, or assimilation? Let us know your verdict in the comments below and vote in the poll we've linked. If you enjoyed this investigation into our deep past, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Until next time, stay curious.